Hey everyone, welcome to Hit the Apex Podcast. I'm Jawad here with you as always, and thank you for joining me for this podcast after the Brazilian Grand Prix. What a great race it was. Probably not the most classic when it came to the middle part of the race. I'll talk about it in great length anyway, but the ending certainly was one that everyone was thrown off their chairs probably, and just when you look at the results and the podium and everything, is certainly going to be a memorable one for this year. So yeah, can't wait to talk about Brazil. It's also a pretty special podcast this week as well, because I've got myself a special guest on a bit later, we recorded this over the weekend, so it's going to be cut into this recording. But I had none other than Deano from the Regen E Racing Podcast. If you guys remember that I was on their podcast earlier this year talking about Moto E, and also, getting to know a little bit more about Formula E, and, Deano coming on this week's podcast with me, I did get to learn a bit more about Formula E. We previewed the upcoming season, which kicks off this coming weekend, I should say, in Saudi Arabia. So, yeah, stay tuned for that part. I'm not going to talk any more about Formula E just yet, but I do feel a bit more enlightened after having him on board, and it was a great chat. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing what you guys think of it, and if you guys are looking forward to it, I hope to hear some feedback on it as well. I mean, it'd be great to have someone like Deano come on a bit more often, if possible, see what we can do in the new year. But as for the present, well, here we go, Brazilian Grand Prix, and a cracker of a race. We had strategy influence a bit of it, then we had some safety car madness at the end of the race, but ultimately, when you look at it on paper, just who won the race, Max Verstappen from pole position, it doesn't really scream out that it was an incredible race, because the driver won from pole position. But when you piece together what happened in between, surely, it'll be one that everyone will talk about and remember for this year and heading into next year as well. So our podium order actually wasn't determined till post-race. So we had Max Verstappen, of course, win the race. Pierre Gasly in a Toro Rosso finishing second. First F1 podium for him, of course, and second for Toro Rosso this year. They've had such an incredible year, and now sit on the prospect of, finishing ahead of Renault for fifth in the Constructors' Championship, which would be Toro Rosso's best finish in a Constructors' Championship in the team's existence. So, when you look at the list of achievements that they've had, the win, the pole position from Sebastian Vettel back in 2008, and then, of course, this year, Danny Kvyat on the podium in Germany, and now Pierre Gasly, who himself only 7 races ago was dumped by Red Bull back to the junior team, and now he's come out and scored a podium. It's fantastic. And then Carlos Sainz for McLaren. Oh my goodness. I mean, they're not the words that I said at the time when we found out, but I'm so over the moon. You guys don't understand, as a fan of McLaren, and I'm sure all the McLaren fans out there were just up in the air and cheering, crying, whatever, let the emotion out. Just let it all out, because it's been, 2,072 days since a McLaren last finished on the podium. Mind you, Carlos didn't actually get to stand on the podium during the ceremony, because it was Lewis Hamilton who finished third on track, but was hit with a 5-second penalty afterwards for his botched pass on Alex Albon later in the race. Bit of a lazy move from Hamilton. Albon left the door quite wide open, but Hamilton, it could have been a clean move, but managed to tag Albon, put him in a spin, and put Albon ultimately out of podium contention. Otherwise, perhaps Albon could have been up on the podium, a Red Bull 1-2 finish, but it was still a Honda powered 1-2 finish, the first for Honda power since the 1991 Japanese Grand Prix, believe it or not. That day was Gerhard Berger finishing first and Ayrton Senna in second. So, and actually, I think in the live blog, I said it was Ayrton Senna that won that race from Gerhard Berger. So, apologies, I did the research this time and got the right got the right result. But yeah, a day of firsts in many respects, and then ultimately that 5-second penalty for Hamilton dropped him to 7th as a result, and that confirmation came through probably an hour after the race was finished, I think. So it took some time, but the trophy was given to Sainz in the end, and Sainz himself had a fantastic race. When you think about him starting from the back of the grid, they had a power unit problem in qualifying. It was a dark day on Saturday for those guys, but then in the race he one-stopped it from the rear of the field, finished 4th on track, and then as a result gets promoted to 3rd. So good on him, good on the team. Can't speak highly enough of it, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we see Carlos Sainz gracing or collecting trophies for F1 podiums, and hopefully not the last we'll see of McLaren in the near future as well. So other than that, well, just quickly on Lewis Hamilton, I mean, lazy move, but he came out quickly afterwards and apologised and took full responsibility for the move. So, there was a few people that came out and bashed him for it, but it's totally unwarranted because, he came out and he owned his mistake. And that's one thing that, when you look back over the years with Hamilton and how, he's matured as a driver, he's a 6-time world champion now, so much responsibility, yada, yada, yada. Owning this mistake is one of those things that, a mature 6-time world champion does. So good on him for doing that. I mean, I was thinking back, when reading these comments that were bashing Hamilton, I'm like, well, it's not really 2011 again where, he was running into Felipe Massa all the time and then blaming Massa for all the incidents. So it's totally different to how things were, and, good on him for coming out and doing that. So unfortunately, that was his race there, P7. Not that it matters, given that they've wrapped up the championships, both Mercedes and Hamilton. But it wasn't the greatest race for Mercedes because you had Valtteri Bottas also out of the race, power unit failure or something along those lines on lap 52. That's what brought out the first of the 2 safety cars. But between Max and Lewis, it was great fighting, great stuff out there. Strategically, they both went on the same strategy. They were Max pulled the trigger, or Red Bull pulled the trigger first. Great stops for Max. Both his pit stops were 1.9 seconds, sub 2.0, which is phenomenal when you consider changing 4 tyres or whatever on a race car. That's 2 seconds. To do it under 2 seconds, I mean, what can you do under 2 seconds? Exactly. Though his first stop was kind of hampered by the unsafe release of Robert Kubica in the Williams. So, Red Bull did the job in the pits. Max would have come out ahead of Lewis on track, but unfortunately it was the unsafe release from Robert Kubica that kind of hurt him. But second stop, again, 1.5 seconds. Max actually pitted under the safety car. So doing that, when Bottas was out of the race, actually helped Max because he didn't really lose any time. The pack was all compressed again. He was still second in the queue, or second as far as behind Lewis Hamilton was concerned in the timing. So after the green flag came out, they went back racing. Verstappen was already passed, or didn't take too long to pass Hamilton for the lead. It was when the next safety car came out, which was contact between both the Ferrari guys, that impending explosion or implosion that I've been talking about, or that I talked about a while ago and wrote that article about too. I might even put the link of that article in this description or the show notes for this week, just for everyone to have a bit of a refresher. I know back then it was sort of people saying, the media are blowing it out of proportion and everything, but this is all what we were fearing would happen. So contact between the 2 Ferrari teammates on lap 66. Leclerc they were on the same tyres basically, and should have been allowed to race. They were racing. Leclerc goes into turn 1, gets past Vettel coming out of the chicane, then on the first straight that comes and the next DRS zone at the end of the first sector, Leclerc leaves room. Vettel's on the right-hand side, and to the right of Vettel is the grass. And basically what happens is both of them touch. It looks like such a minor touch, yet the consequences were pretty catastrophic. Both cars sustained damage. They were both out of the race. Would you say Sebastian Vettel was at fault? Because, Leclerc kind of left him the space and he didn't have to turn. Neither of them had to turn. Or Vettel didn't have to turn left. Could have just stayed straight. But, no penalty was given by the stewards, so it was deemed a racing incident. But internally, there's going to be a lot of questions asked, I'm sure, and both the drivers have to go back to the factory now and explain themselves to all the employees and engineers and staff that are there, because they could have had a podium on the day. And again, this is like typical Ferrari problems. They always seem to find a way to stuff something up. So we were saying that the last two races for them this year are crucial, given that it's not been the greatest year for them. After the mid-season break, they appeared to have the momentum. They had 6 pole positions in a row, 3 wins as well in a row, and they could have had a few more if things didn't stuff up on their own end. Even on the driver's side of things, when you look at Russia, what could have that swap implemented and stuff like that. I think it was after Russia that I wrote that article about the impending implosion at Ferrari. So I will dig that one up for you guys to have a read again. I'll put in the description of the show. But yeah, it was just kind of an unnecessary incident, and it's only going to bring more scrutiny upon them. And also, how did both the drivers look at each other or approach each other now, heading into the final race, but more crucially next year when they could be in championship contention, or have a car good enough to fight Mercedes and Red Bull for the title. So yeah, potential podium gone begging there for Ferrari. Again, they just didn't really have, you could say, the race pace to match Red Bull or Mercedes. Even when you look at the Friday pace analysis and everything, they were behind Red Bull and Mercedes when it came to their race pace. Otherwise, qualifying, they were up there. Vettel was second on the grid, but Verstappen was just phenomenal all weekend, so couldn't really take that one away from him. So that's the story of Ferrari's race, I guess. Another point, going back to Hamilton, he made an additional pit stop when that second safety car came out for the Ferraris. It was an unnecessary stop. I guess they can question it afterwards, but I guess as a push on fresher tyres to go for the race win, in hindsight, maybe if they didn't stop him for that additional stop, perhaps he may not have made the contact with Albon, and wouldn't have ruined his own race too, ultimately finishing off the podium in 7th as a result of the penalty. So that was one for Mercedes to mull over in what has otherwise been a pretty perfect season, apart from Germany, which was, arguably their worst race of the year. You can't wait to see the episode of that on Netflix next year for Drive to Survive. And, quite a few moments that I'm looking forward to, rather than watching the season review DVDs that have become a bit boring over the years. This Netflix series has been amazing. Well, was amazing, the first one that we saw of the 2018 season, which came out in March this year. And if you guys haven't watched it yet and would like to be enlightened more about Formula One and also just how the 2018 season went, go watch Drive to Survive on Netflix. Not that I'm being paid to plug it at all. It's just a personal recommendation, which I think anyone who maybe is on the fringe of it, being an F1 fan or likes good documentaries and stuff like that, they should watch it, because it's not a very technical thing. There's not a lot of jargon or that sort of thing. It's very open for anyone to come along and watch it. It's got drama, excitement, tension, blah blah blah. So for anyone who likes that sort of stuff, I'm sure it's going to be good. So please go and watch it. I know a couple of people who are not F1 fans that did watch it, and they enjoyed it. Not that they'll watch F1 now, but they just enjoyed watching it as a series on Netflix. So there you go. That's the key to liking anything. It has to be a series on Netflix. Not saying that I'd get on board with anything like that, but for some people, perhaps that's what floats their boat. Anyway, with Leclerc as well, he started from 14th because he had that penalty for exceeding his engine usage for the year, so he took on a 4th internal combustion engine. So again, the crash with his teammate kind of ruined the day that Leclerc had, because he had a great run from 14th up the grid. First few laps, he had already made his way past a few cars, so that sort of won't be remembered as much as Sainz, for example, now on the podium from P20. So you got to say Sainz arguably the driver of the day. Elsewhere, when you look down the field, there was a clash between Kevin Magnussen and Daniel Ricciardo. Haas, unfortunately, they were both in the top 10 in qualifying, but then just the race fell away from them as usual. Magnussen, pretty torrid because he was hit by Ricciardo. Dan given the 5-second penalty, but still ended up finishing in the points in P6 as a result of the Hamilton penalty. So good result for him despite the penalty on hand, and that's 3 races in a row now that Ricciardo scored points, and 3 key races too when you look at the Constructors' Championship that they've got going with Toro Rosso. The battle now, 8 points between the two heading into the final race, and 5th in the Constructors, very much on the line, and it's not been the greatest year of Renault, as we've documented all throughout the year on the podcast and everything, and if they lose that 5th now as well to Toro Rosso, I think that'll be a real kick in the stones for those guys. So, yeah, Magnussen unfortunately kicked in the stones repeatedly, not having the pace, getting hit by Dan. Even though Dan got the penalty, it didn't really make Magnussen's race any better, because he came back after the last safety car. He was able to make up a few places, but still finished 11th. So agonisingly just outside the points, unfortunately. Grosjean, same story. He just fell away. It just didn't have the pace in the race or, on the tyres to do anything really. So, again, second worst car of the day, ahead of the Williams, or behind the Williams, I should say, as being the worst car on the day. Who a team that has been pretty bad over the last few races, Alfa Romeo, they got the results that they needed. They got their season best result. With 4th and 5th as a result of the Hamilton penalty. They both two-stopped. Kimi Räikkönen 4th, best result for him in an Alpha. Antonio Giovinazzi as well. Got the news last week that he would be staying with the team for 2020 and got 5th too. So, their first points in 7 races. So pretty much since the Belgian Grand Prix coming back from the mid-season break. So a much-needed boost for those guys, and they've pretty much sealed out, I think it's 8th in the Constructors' Championship, so there's no chance for Haas to score or get close and score more than they can, but there is the chance now that they can Alfa Romeo can catch up to Racing Point and overtake them for 7th, so quite a few positions up for grabs in this final race coming up in Abu Dhabi, but in a couple of weeks that we've got until then, I think they can be left to celebrate the results that they got in Brazil. Toro Rosso were helped by Danny Kvyat also scoring points in 10th, so that's where that 8-point deficit to Renault comes. Also Sergio Perez 9th, again scoring a couple of points for Racing Point. How many times can I say point? I'm bored of the word point now. But Checo, this is just how impressive he's been as a driver throughout his career. He can just has a bad qualifying, doesn't matter. I'll make up those places in the race. So he's done really well this year, considering how limited they have been. They've not been able to really... I guess this is sort of a legacy of what happened last year at the team, is that their development has sort of been stunted. And unfortunately, Lance Stroll, as a result, has sort of caught the wrong end of the stick with that. So he'll be hoping for a better season next year, and Checo as well. So... that'll be very exciting to see when 2020 rolls around. So until then, though, what a race. What a race it was. I guess the ending of the race and the start, the competition between Hamilton and Verstappen as well was really exciting. But just seeing these different names on the podium, first podium for Gasly, first podium for Sainz. It's also the youngest ever podium that they've had in Formula One, youngest average age, and it's great because these drivers, all three of them, were brought into the system by Red Bull at a young age, and you look at where Sainz is now. He's branched out on his own to McLaren, and he's the team leader at McLaren. Gasly, re-establishing himself at Toro Rosso after being dumped by Red Bull this year. You got a feel for Albon, though, like the podium was there, and God, that was such a disaster what happened there. But the chance is still there for him to score a podium in Abu Dhabi potentially. So if he does do that, then all 4 Red Bull drivers this year would have been on the podium. So how about that? That would be quite something too. So very exciting times ahead, and I can't wait for Abu Dhabi if the this last race in Brazil is anything to go by. Alright, just going to do a quick hit the globe and look at what's happening elsewhere in the motorsport world this time, just so we can get to the chat with Deano as quick as possible. It went for like 45 minutes, I think, so it was a pretty lengthy discussion, but it was good fun. But we got the Supercars final round this weekend in Newcastle, so really we're looking at the teams championship in that between Shell V-Power Racing and Red Bull Holden Racing Team. 116 points between those guys, so it's very much at play, and one bad result could sway it to the other one. A lot to play out as far as that's concerned, and I'll have the full debrief next week anyway from that event, and also the talking points article that I usually do. And then we had the MotoGP finale in Valencia over the weekend, and in the background I've got the testing going on. They've got the post-season test, or 2020 starts now test on, where you get to see the new riders on with their new teams and everything. They might not have their 2020 bikes just yet, but it's an important test. So record-breaking season for Marc Marquez, obviously, who won the championship. 420 points he scored this year, which is the most in the Premier class. But also when you look at Honda, Repsol Honda winning the team's championship, I think they scored like 450 points altogether or something like that. So 420 points just scored by Marc Marquez is like, he pretty much single-handedly won them the constructors or the team's championship this year. So that is incredible. And when you look at the other side of the garage at the Repsol Honda team, well, Jorge Lorenzo announced last week that he's going to be retiring, or he has retired now from MotoGP and motorcycle racing altogether. So we wish him all the best in retirement. I guess the injuries this year really took a toll on him. He's not been really great this year, adapting to the Honda after Ducati last couple of years. So I guess this was the only thing for Lorenzo to do, and that was to step away altogether. And at least he's a celebrated 5-time champion in the sport as well. He's won 3 titles in the Premier class, and two minor titles as well in the junior category. So he's going to go down as one of the greats. And racing Valentino Rossi at his peak as well. Casey Stoner, the like, Danny Pedrosa, then the arrival of Marc Marquez. So Lorenzo's achievements will stand, and then of course the last couple of years will be remembered for all the difficulties that he has had, obviously switching from the Yamaha to Ducati, and then announcing that he'll be leaving Ducati last year and coming to Honda, and then Honda this year has not been great for him either, and the nasty injuries that he sustained in the middle of the year ultimately making up his mind for him. We had Fabio Quartararo on the podium in Valencia along with Jack Miller, so successful rookie year for Quartararo. Looking forward to seeing what he can do next year on factory spec machinery, still at the Sepang Racing Team, Petronas Yamaha squad, and then Jack Miller of course as well on the 2020 spec Ducati next year, coming off his most successful season this year, and also the most successful season for any Pramac Ducati rider. So I think 5 podiums or something he scored. So very good stuff from Viva Miller. I love that account on social media, the Dios Miller account. Good fun. So I'll talk in a bit more length about MotoGP and Supercars next time. Anyway, Supercars at least. MotoGP we can leave for another time. interesting hearing news that in Jorge Lorenzo's place next year we'll have Alex Marquez. So it's going to be a Marquez double act with Alex making his debut in MotoGP and alongside his older brother Mark. So for those who are getting sick of Marquez dominating MotoGP, well, now you've got younger Marquez coming in, Alex, and he's meant to be no slouch either. So yeah, we'll see how 2020 fares, but in the meantime we've got this test on in the background to enjoy and watch. So as far as where this is concerned for this week, thank you for joining us. Coming up is my chat with Deano over the weekend about the Formula E season coming up this weekend. But normal service will resume next week, where we'll preview the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and hopefully recap the Supercars event in Newcastle. So until then, have a good one, guys. Stay cool, and we'll see you then. So now we're going to talk a bit of Formula E with the new season coming up the following weekend, starting off in Saudi Arabia. And for that, I've recruited the help of none other than my friend at Regen E Racing Podcast in Dean. Thank you, Dean, for joining me for this little discussion. You know more about Formula E than I do, and I'm hoping to be a bit enlightened by whatever you have to say this afternoon.
Brilliant. I've been looking forward to this all week, actually. It's really good to be on, so thank you very much.
No problem. I did enjoy my time on your podcast a few months ago. That was good fun. So talking about Moto E that time, but yeah, Formula E, that's your big thing. And just let's start off by getting into why it is you love Formula E so much, what attracted you to it, and share your thoughts on how you feel that the category's advanced in the last 6 years. I can't believe it has been 6 years since Formula E burst onto the scene.
Yeah, it's gone quick. I think I started watching at the back end of season 3, and that was mainly due to Jean-Eric Vergne. I used to watch him in Toro Rosso, and then he got unfortunately kicked out and went to Formula E. And there was a couple of others like Sebastian Buemi who went there as well. And it sort of became a thing on my radar when my brother-in-law, he used to watch it as well, and I had no idea. And so that's sort of how our podcast started, is, hey, do you watch this? Yeah, I do. Do you want to talk about it and record it? Yeah, sure. So it was really, really cool. Formula E, it's come a long way. It's really a series that's had, I would say, a lot of new and interesting ideas come into it. But I mean, there's quite a few manufacturers to start with as well, so it's good to see them. You've got Porsche, Mercedes coming in this season for season 6, Mahindra, Nissan, Neo, Audi, Jaguar. And these are pretty much top tier manufacturers. These guys, they know what they're doing. Their racing pedigree is incredible. And I mean, you'll be no stranger to the dominance of Mercedes at the moment, Jawad.
Yeah, and Formula One, and it's good to see them try and branch out away from that as well, and perhaps future-proof themselves as well in racing. And it's just evolution, I guess. Once upon a time all these guys would have raced sports cars or whatever was top tier at the time, but looking at where the technology and stuff is going, it's good to see them all jump behind it. And Porsche and Audi, obviously, because they fall under the same umbrella, being owned by the Volkswagen Audi group, and then the Asian manufacturers as well. Neo, I guess no one had really heard much about until if you follow racing, until the Formula E involvement, and then Mahindra as well from India it's good. So quite a bit of diversity out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the cars come a long way as well. I mean, the first sort of Gen 1 car was very much, I mean, it wasn't a laggard by any stretch, but the Gen 2 car has just really, it's made things a lot more exciting. It's sort of, it's eliminated car swaps as well.
Yeah.
So
the
at the start you needed to have 2 cars per driver because the car couldn't get the whole way. But now with the new batteries and tech, and it's just, and sometimes it is just a flat out race, which we're hoping to sort of minimise. But it's brought some exciting strategy instead of a car swap where the bigger drivers were a bit penalised because they couldn't get in and out of the car as quick as the more slight sort of Sam Bird-like characters. So, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it does also, it was kind of a deterrent, I guess, for most people watching, instead of a regular pit stop, you had to swap for a whole new car. It kind of upset the flow of the race a little bit, maybe. But I reckon just on pure looks, the Gen 2 car looks very striking and very unique as well. It's not trying to look like any other open wheeler out there, which I think I really like about it, and it just stands out from everywhere else. But you're talking about attack mode as well, and some of the rule changes about that coming into the new season. So for those who are not familiar, attack mode is kind of like DRS, or is a push to pass kind of thing. Am I correct, or am I way off on that one?
So it's a piece of racetrack that's off the racing line, normally on a hairpin or close to a hairpin on the straight. So you actually have to make sure that you hit it. And there's a couple of detection zones in that piece of racetrack that the driver has to arm to get attack mode. So in this season, it'll be an extra 35 kilowatts of power, and it's for a certain period of time that you can use it. And once you've picked it up, it's just automatically on for a certain period. It might be 3 minutes or 4 minutes. I can't remember which. But you can only have that at certain times of the race. And there is a specified number of times that you can collect attack mode. So that sort of brings in a quite large element of strategy. Last season you could get it under safety cars, yellows, and so a lot of the drivers would just keep it, safety car, and then you'd have a train going slowly through it. And that sort of took away from what it was trying to do. But this season, yellow flags and safety cars, you can't use attack mode. And so it really is a gamble. If there's a safety car during the end of the race and you've still got an attack mode, disqualified. So it'll mean that a lot of people will be using it further towards the start of the race, the mid-period. It's something that's quite different. I'm not sure about your thoughts on it, what you think of it, but it really does sort of bring a strategy element, replaces pit stops in a way, because quite difficult to be able to charge the cars mid-race.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking exactly, that it's more strategic and kind of a replacement for pit stops. So in that way, I find it very intriguing, and how the teams or the car drivers, look to deploy it. And now that you've mentioned that under safety cars or yellow flags, you can't actually use it, then drivers are going to have to be a bit more wiser about when they use it during the race. And so this is completely different to the fan boost system. I'm guessing fan boost is still around.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people don't like the fan boost. The fan boost is basically a popularity contest online where you vote for your favourite driver, and 5 of them currently get fan boost. It is a sort of push to pass. It's a few seconds, but a major boost in energy, and some drivers get it, some drivers don't. Voting for that, you can vote up to 15 minutes into the race, and I think it starts a week before, but I think it does give an advantage. So that's another strategy element of Formula E is, So basically, Stoffel Van Dorn and 4 other drivers fight for the fan boost every race.
So it's basically whoever's got the biggest fan base is going to be the one who's got the fan boost. I didn't actually see it as being such a huge booster. I thought it might have just been a tiny little boost, but yeah, from what you're saying, it sounds like it does have the ability to make the difference when it comes to, perhaps the pointy end of a race or key positions a driver's fighting for. So, I hope maybe down the line they're might tweak it or something. What do you reckon they'll do?
I hope they do tweak it. I really do, because Stoffel Van Dorn, obviously, a big fan base, and absolutely correctly, brilliant driver. He's good on social media, isn't he? And
yeah, well, I'm a big fan of his, obviously, since his McLaren days at Formula One. So if I was to jump on to do the fan boost thing, which I've never done before, I would probably give the love to Stoffel there. But yeah, he's got the big social media presence, and just, I think, a lot of people ever since Formula One have tacked on to him and stayed.
Yeah, and I think it sort of pushes people towards those sort of drivers, and maybe it makes them check out Formula E, which is all good. But a lot of the bigger factory drivers, they could get the whole Audi factory to vote for Daniel Abt, let's say. And
okay,
that's thousands of votes,
Right. So that's kind of a loophole in that, you could have team employees voting for it, back at the factory then? I didn't really think of that, actually.
Yeah, it's they say it's a solid system. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that aren't really convinced, and it could get gamed potentially, and we did see, obviously, Daniel Abt and Lucas Di Grassi get it quite a fair bit. But I'm not saying there was anything untoward going on, but yeah, a lot of those factory drivers up the pointy end do get it a lot, and so it would be nice, Nick De Vries, it would be nice to see him get it.
Another driver that I've got my eye on for this new season, because kind of his career, just the way it's gone. So this year, obviously winning the Formula 2 championship, we've still got a round to go in Abu Dhabi next time out. But, he was destined, or he was at McLaren for quite some time on their books as a young driver, and then last year decided to sort of break free of that and do his own thing. And then we're like, well, is he going to get into F1 or not? Doesn't look likely. And then I said, well, look, a plum Formula E drive would be fantastic, and to end up with Mercedes, a factory like Mercedes, is pretty good. And, just quickly on those two, Van Dorn and De Vries, what do you reckon how they'll go as a combination? Van Dorn's already got a year under his belt, and De Vries, no slouch from what we've seen in Formula 2.
Stoffel will go well. I think he's had a podium last season in Season 5. He's quick in qualifying. I think he didn't have the car under him last season, HWA, who have now morphed into Mercedes. I don't think, it was very much a transition year for them, a learning year, and I think he sort of put the car above where it should have been. And Gary Paffett, DTM champion, great driver. I think he sort of put the car where it should have been. But Stoffel's a talent. I think he'll do really well, and my co-host Chris really rates him. I think we did predictions in the last episode, and I think he's got him like 11th or 12th.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the top 10 list now that from your last episode, and he's not in that top 10, so just to be sitting outside that top 10, finishing 11th, is pretty good. And that leads to my next question about, we've had 2 new big manufacturers come into Formula E this year. Well, Mercedes not really, given that they were HWA last year, but now that they're branded as a factory Mercedes team, and then of course Porsche, which is a completely new entry, we've known about this for a long time that they're coming. How do you think they're going to fare this year? Being realistic, I mean, I'm being realistic. I don't think that they're going to, beat everybody off the bat, but given their resources and how much they have at their disposal, how do you think they'll go this year, and how long do you reckon it's going to take for them to get to perhaps the pointy end of the grid where you got your Audi and your Techeetah teams at the moment?
I think if Jaguar's anything to go by, and they've been in since season 3, I think they've done better every season, and that's sort of been a work in progress at Jaguar. I sort of expect Mercedes and Porsche to maybe go a little bit quicker, just with the resources that they've got. I would expect by the end of season 7, start of season 8, they will be up the top. I think at the moment, and Chris and I have them finishing 9th and 10th this season out of 12. So I've got Mercedes at 9, Porsche at 10, and Chris has Porsche at 9 and Mercedes at 10. But that's solely because they'll be learning. It'll be a transition year. Mercedes has a customer team as well. So
Venturi, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So
yep.
Last season, Venturi were the manufacturer team, and they gave HWA their powertrain, but now it's reversed. So I think it's going to be, that's a lot to take on, having a customer as well as a full works entry. It's going to be interesting for Mercedes this year.
Do you reckon it could be work to their advantage having Venturi as a customer team? I mean, we have that theory in all motorsport, I guess. The more cars you might have on the grid, the more you can learn and the data you can gather and everything. So perhaps it might speed up their process in comparison to Porsche.
Yeah, I think obviously it's good having 2 sets of data. I think they'll work pretty closely considering the boss at Venturi, Susie Wolf. So yeah, I think Toto and Susie will be, surely they'll be talking about how they can move up the grid. Surely. All
right.
Did you know that?
What's that?
That Susie Wolf was the team boss of Venturi Formula E?
Yeah. I did, yeah, and it was instrumental, I guess, in getting Felipe Massa over to the team, given their link previously at Williams together as well.
Yes, yeah. And those two, those two will work closely as well. Yeah,
and unchanged lineup there for Venturi, which is good. Eduardo Mortara there with Massa, and good to see Massa going around again for another season of full-time racing. It kind of seemed a little bit sad to lose him from Formula One, but given the state that Williams were in at the time, it was bound to happen. But speaking of other lineups, Porsche, so they've got a solid combination. Neil Yarni coming back to Formula E. He raced, I forgot what team it was, for a while ago. And Andre Lotterer, who comes out of that race-winning Techeetah car, where he was teammate with Jean-Eric Vergne for the last couple of seasons, and now into the Porsche car. What do you reckon their combination's going to be like, given that they've been teammates with Porsche in LMP1 previously, but do you reckon, they have enough experience to take this team forward? Like, they're both world-class drivers, but in terms of Formula E experience, how do you rate their chances?
Well, I think Neil's been doing a lot of development on the car because he was announced a long, long time ago with Porsche, and we've sort of been waiting for the announcement, and everyone had Brendan Hartley on their mind.
So did I, actually.
Yeah, unfortunately. But he's probably been doing a lot of the development there, as well as Brendan Hartley. And I think having those two on board is probably going to be, a decent car out of the blocks. Lotterer, a great defender. I think if he can if he can boost himself up the grid, he'll stay there and score good points. He's just relentless in chasing. I think he's one of those guys that the other drivers don't want behind them, because he'll just put it up the inside. He'll force the issue, and his race style is very, very aggressive. And I mean, he was unlucky not to get a win last season. He's a very, very good driver, and I think Porsche have done very well to be able to get him.
Yeah, and I guess would it have been a bit risky putting Hartley, who's a rookie this year in Formula E, he's with Dragon, isn't he, and alongside another rookie in Nico Muller, would it have been a risk for Porsche to put a rookie alongside Neil Yarni, who hasn't had that Formula E race experience for quite some time?
Yeah, I think, the data that they had on Hartley and what they were seeing out of Lotterer, I think if it was me, I probably would have gone for Lotterer as well. And that's just, he's got the experience. He's, a podium getter. He can, he can put the car in places where, I mean, the DS Techeetah car is a very good car, but in races, he was outpacing Vern. Vern eventually, and over the course of a season. But in some single races, Lotterer was definitely there. So if you could get Lotterer, you would have to. That's it.
Yeah, highly rated driver wherever he goes, basically. So, yeah, no, good to see that. Speaking of Jean-Eric Verne, obviously you're a big fan of the combination that he had with Lotterer, so still in grievance over that not being the case anymore, or you're looking forward to seeing them fighting on track for different teams this year?
Yeah, I think Chris and I are both very excited to see Da Costa. Obviously, Da Costa and Sims didn't really get the ball rolling apart from Antonio's win of the first race of last season. But yeah, I think it just sort of petered off. He needs to really keep up and consistency, which in Formula E is key. But yeah, he needs to do something, because I think Jean-Eric Verne over the course of a season will be very hard to beat. Lotterer, he may have done it. He may have done it if he had a bit more luck, but I'm not sure Antonio can do it. Da Costa's a good driver, and I just think Jev's better.
Yep, and speaking of, I guess, Jev and the championship and everything, so he's won back-to-back titles, first driver in Formula E to do so. New season, is he going to run away with it this year? Is he going to be the more consistent driver, as you say, or is there someone else who can take the challenge to him from another team? Who do you rate as being, I guess, the championship contenders? I've got your top 10 lists here. Looks really good, actually, but I'll let you explain who you've got to challenge for the crown this year.
Yeah, for me, Sebastian Buemi, he's always there. He's just mighty in qualifying, so he'll always be up there. And the Nissan is last season it was a very fast car. Robin Freins, the Dutchman, he drives for Envision Virgin, and they have the Audi powertrain, which is a very highly rated powertrain, and it's very quick. Lucas de Grassi's always there, and Da Costa, but that's only if he can stick with Verne. Chris also has Mitch Evans, the Kiwi. He's putting a lot of faith in Jaguar and Mitch Evans, and Sam Bird as well, who's also in the other seat for Envision Virgin. Those are sort of the protagonists, I reckon. And I've given it to Robin Freins. I reckon he will win. Yeah, sort of an outside bet, but he had 2 wins last season, very fast. I think qualifying wise, he just needed to be up the grid a bit further. He sort of found himself in the pack, and when you do that in Formula E, you're sort of asking for trouble.
Yeah, given that, you're all on street circuits, basically concrete jungles, qualifying is quite key when it comes to any sort of street circuit. So you're saying that, having a better qualifying, being more on the pointy end of the grid is going to help Friends' case. And he's been highly rated throughout his entire career as Friends, and I'm not sure if he's actually won any major championships since his junior Formula days. I mean, I did get to see him win the Bathurst 12-hour in a GT Audi car a few years ago, but apart from GT racing, I don't know if he's won anything significant.
Yeah, I haven't really followed him too closely, but I just thought last year he looked incredible, and I mean, if the luck went his way, then he definitely could be. I think he was leading the championship late into the season last year, but it just didn't come together. And obviously the Audi powertrain as well. Daniel Abt and Lucas Di Grassi. Di Grassi seems to have got the better of Abt the last few seasons, and so that's why he's there and Abt's not.
Yeah, you don't really see much of Abt at the pointy end. Even when Di Grassi won his championship as well, you didn't really see Abt feature much. So I guess he's kind of just there, not really making up the numbers, but just there as the solid number 2 driver for Audi.
Yeah, I mean, Abt, I think his best race was season 4 in Germany in his home race. He had a clean sweep. He won the race. I think he led every lap, and he had fastest lap and pole. He had the whole lot. And so, yeah, I mean, an absolutely flawless weekend. So he can do it. But, yeah, he sort of hasn't been able to trump Di Grassi too often like that.
Yep, and as far as teams championship is concerned as well, who do you reckon? I mean, when you look at the lineups, Virgin have a pretty solid lineup. Like, you've got both their drivers being top 10 in the championship. Nissan as well, with Buemi and Ollie Rowland, who has been pretty solid so far. So, yeah, you reckon those are going to be the guys fighting to cheetah for the teams championship? Any others that can get up there?
I think it'll be those two, probably. I think it'll be Envision Virgin, Techeetah, and Nissan. Yeah.
Fair enough. And Mitch Evans, excited to see him do some good things as well this year. And given you said before, Jaguar, they've been on the rise. They've gradually built their way. Is this the year that they really get into the championship battle, or are they still probably a year away from being at that top tier level?
They're probably another year away, and I think Chris, my co-host, would agree. But they are doing good things, and they won't be in the teams championship, but that's only because they've got James Collado, who's a rookie, partnering Mitch Evans this season. I think Mitch Evans and, my co-host Chris, he's got him 3rd in the championship this year. So, he obviously puts a lot of faith in him. I've got him in 7th. I think he'll be in the top 10. He's quick, good at qualifying. Jaguar got their first win last season. They will be there or thereabouts. The thing with Formula E is that out of 13 races last season, there was 9 different winners. So you have a completely wide open midfield, which is just incredible. And anyone can win. Anyone can win. And, someone like Nico Muller, Brendan Hartley, if they won a race, that would completely skew the table. It would just be incredible.
It would, and that's what excites me about, possibly watching the entire season this year, is how every weekend there is no, I don't want to say there is no form guide as such, but it's kind of left up in the air as to, who's going to get on pole position and who's going to, who can win. And 9 different winners, out of your 13 races, that's a pretty exciting result sheet to look at the end of the year. I mean, compared to other categories at the moment, let's say Formula One, for example, where you've only been limited to 3 teams winning over the last 5 years, it does kind of wear off a little bit, but, they're working on ways to change that. But Formula E kind of reminds me of MotoGP in a way, where you do have those midfielders in with an opportunity to win the race on any given weekend. And same thing in the Aussie Supercars Championship as well, where maybe not so much this year where you've had two teams really take a stranglehold of it. But, in previous years, you might have, your midfielders come through to take a surprise win, or they get the better setup and everything. So, yeah, out of the 14 races this year for Formula E, I wonder how many different winners they're going to have this time.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be more than 5. I think it's so hard to call. And in testing, I think they were 0.2 or 0.3. I think the whole field was a second apart from 1 or 2 cars. It was just, it'll be close. It'll be very close. I mean, Verline, Roland, Degrassi, DaCosta, Buemi, Jev, Frines, Evans, Sam Bird, even one of the BMWs could get in the mix. I mean, there's so many drivers there that could win a race. It's just, and that's just one of the most exciting things about this sport at the moment.
Yeah, and that's going to be exciting moving forwards as well. So, calendar, you're happy with the 14 rounds that we've got? 14 races this year across 12 different locations. I see London's back on the calendar. Is it a different venue that they're racing at this time, or the same? Because there was at Battersea Park, wasn't it, previously?
Yeah, it was. They're actually on the docks at You might have to cut this out. Hold on.
That's all right.
Where are they?
All the important questions coming out. No, it's no problem at all.
Yeah, they're at the Excel Centre this time. So it's right on the docks in London. Yeah.
Okay, so so that'd be exciting because obviously in Britain they do have a big motorsport fan base and everything. But you're happy with the way that the calendar's spread out? We've got just the opening round before the end of this year, and then January, February, and then when we get into the colder months for us on this side of the world, that's where the championship really gets into the thick of it, going to places like Rome, Paris, those are great. The Berlin E-Prix is always quite popular too, and a few new locations I see, Jakarta and Seoul as well.
Yeah, South Korea joining the grid. That's good to see. It's a big market for cars, obviously.
Yeah, who knows if they'll ever have a Korean manufacturer come into Formula E. Maybe Kia might decide to get in on the act sooner or later. No Hong Kong, for obvious reasons, being omitted from this year's calendar, and they've got Marrakesh in its place.
Yeah, Marrakesh is a good track. I think the drivers, they won't have any qualms. I think Hong Kong's very... I think they're probably sick of going there at the moment, and I think a lot of the seasons have, or at least 1 or 2 have started in Hong Kong, and it's a very technical track to start with. So I think they'll enjoy Diriyah more in Riyadh.
Yep, and 2 races to start off the season there, which will be exciting to see. Kind of winding it down now, so I guess what do you see for the future of Formula E now? It's kind of, there was a lot of uncertainty about it in the beginning, and as I said before, it's kind of surprising that it has been 6 years, but in a good way, and now it's really established itself there. The drivers are all, looking at just even the top 10 lists, and then the guys who miss out on the top 10s in you and Chris's predictions, it's just an amazing roster of drivers. They've really established themselves. How do you see the future panning out for them, and also just the category in general? Is it just going to keep going from strength to strength? Is it just going to keep getting bigger and bigger?
Yeah.
Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it will just continue to grow. I think it's been growing steadily, and I think as more people find it, and sort of see the close racing, see what is on offer there, which is a lot, and it's very enjoyable, in my opinion. Of course it is, because I do a Formula E podcast, but there's a lot to like with Formula E. And with the likes of Nick de Vries choosing Formula E as a destination for his next season. Formula 2 champion, very sought after. He could have gone anywhere, apart from Formula 1, which he should be in Formula 1 as well, There's drivers in Formula 1 that I would have Nick De Vries over, but, we actually did an episode on the Formula E drivers and, should have they had a chance in Formula 1 and those sort of things. But yeah, it's interesting that these young drivers, that Formula E is now an outlet and a place to go if the Formula 1 doors closed. And that's exciting, to have those guys ready, fresh faces and future stars of the sport going to Formula E.
Yeah, and it's good to see that it's not just like a fallback now where, it was kind of seen as this place where the Formula 1 rejects go. It's actually just established its own identity in that people or drivers want to be Formula E world champions. Jean-Eric Vergne hasn't thought 1 minute about going back to Formula 1. I'm sure with same thing with Buemi and Degrassi. But for De Vries, perhaps he might, spend the rest of his, not the rest of his career, he's still very young, but spend a good chunk of his open wheel career now as a Formula E driver and perhaps, multiple world champions, something like that. That's got a good ring to it.
It does. I think the main or the talking point will be when a Formula E driver gets signed for a Formula 1 seat. And that's going to be really when Formula E is looked at as, there's guys there that should be now, no question, but it'll just take a signing to really have Formula E as, not an equal series yet, but one that, is more recognised by the Formula 1 fans if it's not already. Do you kind of get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, definitely. Say, for example, if Pascal Wehrlein ends up back in Formula 1 or something, is that sort of kind of the lines you're coming across? Or even if De Vries or Robin Freins, who was kind of on the fringes of Formula 1 but never quite made it.
Yeah, sort of, or a Maximilian Günther after a stellar drive this season in BMW, or, De Vries. Stoffel gets put back in a different car in Formula 1 due to his, just outstanding drives with Mercedes. Mercedes. Imagine if Stoffel went from Formula E to Formula 1.
Yeah, and in a Mercedes too, that would give McLaren a bit of humble pie, I reckon, to chew on. But no, it is exciting, and I did enjoy listening to that episode that you guys did of your fantasy scenarios of if you could have Formula E drivers go over to Formula 1 or vice versa and stuff. And a shame really that given the recent news about Nico Hülkenberg, I guess not really finding a home on the Formula 1 grid for next year. It's a shame that he didn't really press for a Formula E drive if I guess maybe he didn't really want it, but he'd be a good fit in a Formula E car, you reckon? Yeah,
I do. Obviously, Hülkenberg, very, very accomplished in Formula 1. He just hasn't quite made the podium and has been unlucky with Renault of late. But wouldn't they just be clamouring to get him in Formula E? That sort of name for Formula E, as a series, they would love it. But I think a lot of the teams would definitely welcome Hülkenberg. I'm not sure that they would like his salary, but
well, that's I think the reason Renault wasn't going to take him for another year, because asking for the big bucks and everything. So yeah, wherever Hülkenberg ends up, we'll have to wait and see. And I do think he'd be a good fit in Formula E. And we all forget that he did win Le Mans back in 2015, so he is no slouch, even though he's got no Formula 1 podium. You would have heard as well during the week, or last week I should say, that Formula 1's announced this new push towards zero carbon or being carbon neutral by 2030, and then at events in 2025. What's your reaction to that? And also, could you see possibly in the future Formula E and Formula One possibly even coming together, like there being a point of convergence where, you know, both categories maybe not combine, but like can bounce off each other for, you know, different ideas and share technologies and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they do this. I'm sure nobody feels that it's a bad thing. Absolutely, it's a great initiative, and it's good that Formula One wants to be greener and wants to look after the environment. And I think you said, was it that the car's 0.7% of the total carbon emissions is the car's running?
Yeah, during a race,
Yes,
and
yeah.
most of I guess their carbon footprint is, you know, what goes on at the factories or, you know, even at the racetrack with the fans and everything, and also just transporting, because, you know, they still use Boeing 747 planes to jet everything around, and those things use up so much fuel. So, you know, just improving all those other procedures, I think, is what they want to do. But as far as, like, you know, sharing ideas with Formula E is concerned, you know, is Formula E doing anything differently to reduce their carbon footprint as far as, like, all that off-track stuff is concerned?
No idea. Maybe just cut that.
That's all right. I'd be interested to I might even give it a bit of a further research after we go off air anyway, because yeah, it's really not really like, I've always had a interest in this sort of thing, but when, you know, motor racing is seen as something that is so, you know, or people regard it as being damaging to the environment and stuff like that, when you do have an all electric series, a world championship, and then now you've got Formula One, which is still, you know, the pinnacle of open wheel racing, trying these initiatives, it only speaks of positivity. So I'm really intrigued to see where this leads in the future.
Yeah, no, I am too as well. It's good to see that they actually are taking a stand and you know, drawing a line, and these initiatives can only be good for the environment. And yeah, it is a problem, and it's something we need to look at seriously.
Yeah, indeed we do. So on that note, I guess, thank you, Dean, for joining me again. It's been a long time coming, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts on the upcoming Formula E season. Good luck to all the teams and drivers, starting off with the weekend in Saudi Arabia. And I'm going to be listening to you guys because you're going to be recording every week now, I hope, with the new season starting, or, you know, once every 2 weeks and everything. What's your frequency, if you want to let the viewers know?
Yeah, it'll probably be every couple of weeks. I'm doing a lot of travelling up until Christmas, but at the start of 2020 will be when I'll be able to follow everything. So there'll be 2 separate podcasts, because there'll be so much to cover for the first 2 races of the season. One will be coming out straight after the race almost. We'll be recording on the Sunday, and the other one might take a week to come out, but we'll just see how we get on. But we'll try and get one out every 3 weeks if there's no sort of racing on. But yeah, we'll hopefully be able to cover it pretty well.
Yeah, very exciting. And you guys have also got the support category that follows Formula E, the Jaguar I-Pace Trophy as well. So I'll be keen to have a look into that and also follow what you guys think on that one too. And so Regen E Racing, you can follow it on Twitter, guys, at Regen Racing. It's a great podcast. A lot of love for them, for Chris and Deano. And Deano, again, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to chat Formula E, and I actually am looking forward to watching this new season. Try to watch all the live races, if not on demand, if the timing's a bit dodgy. So yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
No worries. Thank you.